There's no limits when it comes to creativity in Baldur's Gate 3. Flinging boxes at the speed of sound, seeking relationships, and becoming whoever or whatever you want are all viable options, because there's no wrong way to play, and thanks to the amount of freedom the game has to offer, it's attracted many different types of people. So in this video, let's take a look at 10 types of players who play Baldur's Gate 3. Let's get started with the Weirdos. Weird players like to do whatever they can to make their characters look ridiculous. For example, if your character looks like it could have been made in Oblivion, then you're exactly who I'm talking about. They often accompany this grotesque figure with an awful name like Giga Chad, Fedora the Explorer, or Scott. And these people do things in-game that a normal person just wouldn't consider, such as self-imposing masochistic rules or role-playing in a specific way that's kind of like, I guess you could do that, but why would you want to do that? Some of them even obsess over certain romanceable characters at levels that would make even their real-life friends concerned. The speedrunners also belong here. I mean, just look at the stuff they're doing. It's not normal to finish the game faster than most people are creating their characters, by stuffing allied corpses into crates and flinging them at 1,000 miles per hour, or labeling your newly discovered strategies as kidnapping. It's a little weird. But weird players are often the ones who find all of the coolest stuff. At least that's what I keep telling myself to justify my actions. Anyways, moving on. Whenever you have a game that takes any amount of strategy, you're gonna find the min-maxers. The people who could have used that drive to help find solutions for world hunger, or had successful careers as professional Excel gurus. But instead, they've dedicated all their time to find ways to add any possible damage rolls to their combos which are already beating every encounter in just one turn, or doing math calculations to find the optimal level 4 feats for every single in-game scenario. Min-maxers like to walk around with buffs blocking out a quarter of their screen, and they act like it's normal. These people love spreadsheets about items, skills, quests, or anything else they can optimize. They usually get tunnel visioned into playing the right way and miss out on a lot of the happy little mistakes that the other players find. Min-maxers are driven by mechanics, so often story is just a means to an end. To them, the only correct dialogue choice is the one that gives the best item or experience reward, to aid in their mission to make the hardest fights in the game as easy as possible, while simultaneously complaining that the game needs a higher difficulty level. And to be honest, they're not wrong about that. But I've always enjoyed seeing the ridiculous ways people min-max in games. And I know it's a lot of fun to deal 80 damage to every goblin you encounter in the game, but my advice for you is to try some difficulty increasing mods and give yourself a real challenge. And since I just mentioned mods, the next type of player we're looking at is the modder. Mods allow Baldur's Gate 3 to be anything a person wants it to be. While normal players are picking elves, modders are out there enjoying spooky skeletons dancing into cutscenes, minotaurs T-posing, or even violin playing fish people. The modder is a player who doesn't get frustrated by janky bugs or immersion breaks, and they're typically the most patient type of player. While the average player might take a break if the game kept crashing all the time, the modder is more willing to troubleshoot their problems for hours just to get a cute hairstyle or a better looking ground texture. Modders are problem solvers, so if they don't like a companion, they sculpt it into whatever the perfect replacement is. Modders are probably the only players who hate patches, because whenever their mods break, they don't know what spells came from the base game. And for this group of people, the game just gets better the longer the game exists. It's also a little weird that for once, modders didn't have to be the ones to add all the nudity into the game, which is probably why this game has so many of the next type of player, the dating simmers. I don't know what it is exactly. Maybe it's the sexy vampire connecting with an age group of former Twilight fangirls, the strong female leads, or that bear scene. But this community has gathered a dedicated group of players who treat Baldur's Gate 3 as if it's an old school Japanese dating sim. I think what surprised me most was that when I was going through the reviews for the game, roughly 25% of the positive reviews are about how attractive certain characters are, meaning this group is a lot larger than I originally thought. This type of player typically spends ages in the character creation screen, like literally hours, to get their character to look as pretty as possible. And for some reason, they usually play a bard or another charisma class. The dating simmers mainly look at dialogues as a way to satisfy their companion's needs, and tend to focus a little more on seeking approval rather than progressing the main story. They're willing to reload a save just because they saw the dreaded Asterion disapproves message pop up. And some of these dating simmers are even causing their girlfriends to complain that their real-life relationship is at risk because of the characters in the game, which really just speaks wonders to how great a job Larian did at making people feel like the characters actually love you. Like honestly, if you ever try to end one of these in-game relationships, the scene is just so heart-wrenching that even I find myself reloading to undo it. With all this in mind, I think it's safe to say that Baldur's Gate 3 is easily 2023's top dating simulator, and it's great to see these people found somewhere to fit in. Let's take a look at our next players, the Savescummers. Savescummers tend to get a lot more hate than any other type of player, but to be honest, everyone does it to some extent. Just to be clear, this doesn't really count the people who just keep losing encounters and are being forced to reload over and over. It's more the type of person who wants to see every possible outcome in just one playthrough. But I can kind of understand that reason because it would take a long time to see everything otherwise. The Savescummers I can't understand are the extreme ones. The ones who are reloading every single time a spell missed, because in the Savescummer's mind, if your ability has a 90% hit chance, that actually should have been rounded to 100, and if an enemy crit you twice in a row, that's just BS. To these people, dialogue checks are more like dialogue speed bumps, because they're gonna pass it eventually, and every time these players steal, even if it's from a literal child, they need a quick save ready, just in case, so that they never have to face the consequences of their actions. Those are the real Savescummers out there. So if you have a keyboard that looks like this, or if you have 948 quick saves in Act 1, then you have an addiction, my friend. I'm all for people enjoying the game the way they want to. But if your save's coming to that extent, just go join the modders and download some actual cheats instead. This next type of player also suffers from their addictions. They are the cheesers. Anyone who's ever played a Larian game before may have felt at one time or another that they are forced into the role of becoming a cheeser. And once you start cheesing, it's nearly impossible to stop. It probably started with you spending 5 minutes discreetly placing barrels so you can explode entire groups of enemies in one turn, to avoid a combat encounter that would have taken just 3 minutes if you did it normally. Or maybe you're abusing turn-based mode to end encounters before they even started. But cheesers constantly need higher quality of cheddar to satisfy themselves. They'll find ways to steal by abusing mechanics rather than reloads. They'll acquire weapons that were never intended to be used by the mortal man, and find Gale to be more useful dead than alive by utilizing his necrotic corpse as a weapon of mass destruction. The cheeser is constantly seeking out YouTube tutorials and Reddit guides to further their toolkits. To them, this is all part of the game, and it shows how clever they are for thinking of doing it. And luckily for them, they have a game developer who fully supports their ridiculous strategies. Cheesers tend to be the happiest of all players, and they don't complain about difficulty levels or bugs, because they love abusing them. So if you're a cheeser, subscribe to the channel, because I'll keep finding new feta to fuel your addiction. Next, we have the I hate reading, but I'm gonna play a CRPG anyways guy. So remember earlier when I said there's no wrong way to play in Baldur's Gate 3? Well, it turns out that was only mostly true. I know not everyone's a pro when it comes to this style of game, but there's a truly special group of individuals who just refuse to read or pay attention to anything going on in a story-driven RPG. Some of these players even complained the tutorial boss was impossible to beat, and instead of reading in-game, they took to raging online. But maybe the game was just too vague about what they should have been doing. Let's take a quick look if that could have been the issue.
Connect the nerves of the transponder.
Nope, not at all. Turns out they caused their own problems. Some people were confused why they had a bad time when they killed characters without thinking about consequences, advancing to areas while ignoring warnings that they're underleveled and that the quest will be progressed, only to return to find that they got locked out of big sections of the game, and then played until they met a game over screen. And instead of thinking, did I cause this problem? They thought, no, it's the game being bugged that was the problem. It's hard to blame them entirely though, because a lot of them were just flavor of the monthers who blindly chased trends. The gamers who went from Diablo 4 to Baldur's Gate 3, then to Starfield, and then back to Baldur's Gate 3, and now they're getting ready to jump ship to Cyberpunk. Or wherever their favorite React streamer, who never actually played the game but hyped it up anyways, says to go to next. Also, no hate to him, because I love the guy's streams, and even he'll admit that he did this.
And I farmed like 15 videos about Baldur's Gate 3. I haven't even played the fucking game.
Hopefully at least some of these guys who don't normally read stuck around and found a new genre that they love. But if not, they'll be back in December whenever Baldur's Gate 3 wins the Game of the Year award to give it another chance and tell their friends that they played it and it sucked, and it doesn't deserve Game of the Year. Now for the restarters. If you've played Baldur's Gate 3 for over 200 hours but never entered Act 3 because you've started 6 new characters since release, then you may be a restarter. This type of player tends to be easily distracted, and as soon as they learn something new, they need to do it right away. YouTubers and reviewers heavily influence the restarters, causing them to go back to Act 1 after learning any minor details that they may have missed out on. While some people may be mildly annoyed that they messed up a romantic relationship, the restarter will be so enraged that they recklessly throw away an 80-hour save file just to get a chance to kiss Karlach. They're perfectionists who get stuck in a loop because they want the one ending that they do finally see one day to be truly flawless. Most of the restarters that I've met over the years picked up this habit from other games and have a history of never finishing any because they don't want their stories to come to an end. So for you restarters out there, all I have to say is this. Did you know that Dwagar get an infinite use invisibility racial at level 5? It isn't even listed on the character creation screen. This ability is so overpowered that it creates a unique playstyle just for that race, making it absolutely worth starting a new game for just to try it out. Next we have the Explorers, the people who took a chance on Baldur's Gate as their first CRPG. They probably didn't know much about D&D and possibly didn't even like the idea of a turn-based game, but they took the jump in anyways. Explorers will typically loot literally everything in the game, just in case it does something, because surely someone in the game is going to ask them for a spoon, right? Why else would they put so many there? Explorers will take on any quest and gladly help out anyone in danger. They'll lose fights, kill traitors or companions without knowing who they actually were, and create stories that an experienced player may have never even thought possible. Explorers are impressed by the small small things in the game. They love that they can pet animals or play songs. They may even be shocked that a game like this exists where they can talk with cute squirrels or a rotting corpse. For them, the difficulty may be challenging even on the easiest setting, but we all started there at one point. Hells, even basic movement can be a test of skill for someone new to this style of game, as traps may frequently down their entire team. Explorers, don't give up. You'll improve, and the game just becomes more fun the more you learn. And after you've finished Baldur's Gate 3, you have a world of wonderful CRPGs or tabletop adventures waiting for you. And lastly, the veterans. Whether you've come from D&D, Divinity, Neverwinter Nights, or even the old school Baldur's Gate games, you came into this game with a plan from day one. While most people were being amazed that it's possible to pick up and throw rats in the game, the veterans actually planned their builds around throwing rats. Veterans embrace a challenge and live to discover new ways to play the game. They're more likely to stick with an original game plan of either a good run or an evil one, and then stay consistent with their choice throughout the entire campaign. They know that even though an item says it's worth 500 gold, that the best a merchant can do is 75. They knew that half the items in the game don't actually have any purpose, so they're more likely to just pick up the useful ones like scrolls and potions, but never actually use any of them, because they wanted to save them for when they really need them. Veterans know all of the cliches, like checking behind the paintings or under the floorboards for secrets, and are quick to pick up on the small hints that the game drops. They're more likely to find themselves being stuck on puzzles because they don't actually cheat like everybody else does. This type of player is rarely surprised, but they still love the genre and will continue to seek great games that support their desires. And I know the veterans out there are happy to see that Baldur's Gate 3 put a spotlight on the CRPG genre for the first time in a long time. And now I have to ask, where do you find yourself among this list? Are you in a few categories? Or maybe I missed you entirely? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, it does help out the channel. And as always, thanks for watching. Proxy out.